Good afternoon. Welcome, family, friends, and community of Pauline, Mildred Roberts. We want to welcome you, and we want to begin with a word of prayer. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we find ourselves here together with a true mix of emotions, of great sadness and grief, as we remember Pauline. We remember her as a mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, wife. She was a daughter. She was a friend. And she was a faithful servant and lover of Jesus Christ. So as we grieve, as we remember our joyous moments, the fun times, all the memories, and we mourn the loss of her, we remember that she knew that you were walking along with her, and that we might remember that as well, and know that we are not alone in this time. So we lift each other up, and we continue to be grateful for her. And we thank you that for this time together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Before I begin the life sketch of Pauline Roberts, I would like to especially appreciate Dan and Laura Lee's contributions to this life sketch. I could not have done it without them. And much of the material is taken from a binder that contained actually stories she wrote. So you are hearing Pauline's voice in these stories. Pauline Mildred Rindon, later Roberts, was born on Sunday, November 10, 1940, at the Wilshire Hospital in Los Angeles, California. She was Daniel and Erna Rindon's first child after about 5 years of marriage. Dan worked at UCLA for the maintenance department, and Erna was a homemaker. In 1941, the Rindon family moved from West Los Angeles to a large ranch in Oakhurst, California, a town located near the back entrance of Yosemite National Park. This move started an era that for Pauline was a favorite time in her life. Her father, Dan, had the responsibility of managing the Green Acres Ranch for his sister, Mary Alice, and her husband, Duke Green. These years produced some happy memories for little Pauline. She loved to get lost in the tall rows of corn and then delight to find her way out. When small, she loved to ride on her father's shoulders when he went out to check the orchard. It seemed so far to the ground for her, but she still felt safe. It made her feel so tall, and she liked to get a better look at things she couldn't see from the ground. Pauline could always find something to do on the ranch and found that she loved being outdoors, loved nature, and discovered that she could make work a game. She loved to talk to anyone, young or old, and make friends with them. These happy years ended when her aunt and uncle divorced, leading her dad, Dan, to seek work at a local lumber mill. The family moved into a rustic, primitive ranch with no electricity, no plumbing, and an outhouse. Pauline described that ranch as simple made. The house was made of sand-sawn lumber that didn't always match up, leaving gaps between many of the boards. The cold nights made the quilt and the bed very comforting to snuggle under. When the sun went down, Pauline and her younger sister, Loretta, didn't want to get up until their mother lit the fire in the stove in the morning. That is, unless they had to use the can tucked under their beds as a substitute toilet. The arrival of their cute baby sister, Linda, brought a delight that helped them to endure their life in this setting. Once Pauline's father started his own lumber mill, he was able, with a couple of other men, to build homes, including one for his family. While the other homes had simple outhouses, the outhouse for the Rindon family consisted of a two-seater. Pauline thought it was nice not to have to wait anymore. Christmas was always a wonderful time of year for Pauline. First, she loved the snow. She loved catching the falling snowflakes on her tongue, making snow angels and snowmen, and having snowball fights. Sometimes her mother would make ice cream with the snow by mixing it with canned milk, sugar, and cinnamon. Pauline loved the way the snow magically changed her whole world into a sparkling wonderland. Everything smelled so fresh and clean. Even later in life, she seemed to be transformed into that innocent, playful child she once was, sparkling with excitement and mischief. Pauline loved to have fun. But after she made the red wagon, a Christmas gift, go very fast until a wheel stuck and turned it over, causing little sister Linda to get skinned up and cry, she got switched for reckless driving. Nevertheless, she took to the trees, learned to climb pine trees with their branches like steps clear to the top. But when Loretta followed her example, she fell, cutting her foot. When their mother found out that Loretta was merely following Pauline's example, she scolded Pauline because she ought to know better than to climb trees. Now forbidden to climb them anymore, Pauline went to the ones far from the house, where she could see for some distance. She loved the excitement of being so high. Then one day her mother found out and she got switched for climbing a tree. The small room Pauline and her family lived in had an access just right for Pauline's cat Jerry, who visited her nightly where they kept each other warm under the covers. Then Pauline's grandfather came to visit, and he got Pauline's bed. Jerry came down as usual to visit Pauline, only to find mid-air that something had changed. With bared claws, he swiped Grandpa's face. Grandpa yelled and jumped up swinging, thinking he was being attacked by a mountain lion. The next morning at breakfast, he told this story about fending off a mountain lion so dramatically that Pauline laughed until her sides ached. She didn't have the heart to tell him that it was her cat that came to cuddle. Eventually, the family moved to a house with running water and electricity. The girls couldn't stop turning on and off the lights until their father made them stop. In 1952, the Rindon family moved to Fresno, then to Chico in 1957. After graduating from Chico Senior High School in 1958, Pauline was briefly married and divorced. In 1959, she worked at Leo's Diner in Chico. Delta, the cook there, kept showing Pauline a picture of her brothers. One of them was Mark Roberts. Delta said her brother was coming to visit her and that Pauline couldn't date anyone until she had met him. When they met, they were attracted at first sight. Marrying Mark led her back to rural logging community again, since Mark worked in a sawmill in Feather Falls for about 3 years. Living there brought back fond memories of her childhood. Moving back to Chico with her family, Pauline was a homemaker who did Avon sales. The family took many camping and fishing trips to explore the Weaver Trinity River area, remembering how she had caught fish as a child, including a trout that weighed a pound and was 15.5 inches long. She made sure that her family and she went camping and fishing for at least 2 weeks in a remote area that they took other fishing trips at available holidays. In 1970, Mark and Pauline bought a home that was part of the Sweat Equity Program. The whole family spent weekends and holidays doing work on the house. By the summer of 1971, the Roberts family had moved into their own home. Not long after that, after Pauline, Danny, and Laura Lee had taken Bible studies, Pauline was baptized in the Chico SDA Church, followed later by Danny and Laura Lee. The children began to attend the Chico Adventist School. About this time, Pauline started working for Mangrove Medical Group. She operated the switchboard and did filing for them. This was, of course, in addition to keeping up with the active schedule of her children. She made weekends special by taking her children and her friends on a hike. They explored much of the areas surrounding Chico, Paradise, and Richardson Springs. They found fossils, tadpoles, snacked on pine nuts, and various berries. Pauline seemed to have a special knowledge of plants, trees, flowers, and creatures. In fact, she seemed to know something about anything. Before Google, you could just ask Pauline. Pauline was a planner, Every special holiday, every birthday, every achievement, every graduation, Pauline was there in person or had a special gathering, cake, or even a card. She kept track of everybody's birthday. Mark and Pauline sent out annual Christmas cards with letters to friends, family, and church family. Sometimes the list must have been exhausting, but she wanted to make sure you knew you were special to her. Pauline made sure you were included. She also made sure her friends and family stayed connected. Pauline would often send out thinking of you cards and little notes to stay in touch and to make sure you knew you were important to her. That was really thoughtful. Pauline visited church members that were in the hospital and regularly visited those in nursing homes. She was especially devoted to those who didn't have other family visiting them. She would also bring them fresh fruit and treats from her garden. Since Christmas was a special event for Pauline and Mark, they coordinated the Christmas gift giving for the Holbrook Indian School students. This took tremendous effort, but they took the time to find out what gift each student would like and found sponsors to match. They ended up doing a lot of gift wrapping and delivery themselves. This was a huge task that they did for many years. Pauline said that it gave her so much joy to know that she could make a difference to even one student. Pauline and Mark were blessed with 7 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren, and still counting. All are stars and blessings from God. In this life, Pauline has not allowed herself to be a star attraction. She has been the glue that kept the stars together and made them beautiful. Without the glue, all the pieces are just jagged like little triangles. But it is her children's hope that in the process of being around Pauline's example, that enough glue has rubbed off on them that they may be a shining star or make another into a shining star to glorify God. This is also a homily, brief homily. My own, and I'm speaking to myself now, my own memories of Aunt Pauline centered around visits she and Uncle Mark, with their children, made to visit Uncle Mark's parents, my grandparents. They weren't regular visits. Northwestern Oregon was far enough to make the trip from Chico long and tiring, especially with kiddies. But on those rare occasions when they did visit, I felt at home with the whole family. What stands out, though, is the Christmas that Aunt Pauline sent me a gift through the mail. The box was long and narrow, and I couldn't imagine what was in it. When I opened it, I received a real surprise. Aunt Pauline had sent me a Barbie doll. My mother was a little nervous about that Barbie doll because it had earrings and lipstick. My mother was a very conservative Adventist at the time. She wouldn't have felt that way in later years. So she was tempted to take it from me. And I was a little crestfallen, and she saw the look on my face, and she said, well, let's see. And she pulled the pins out for the earrings. She said, well, I think you can have it. And I was grateful that I could still have that doll. And later on, I was able to add other dolls to the set. I remained ever grateful to Aunt Pauline for sending me something so special for Christmas. On the rare visits my family and I made to Chico to visit Aunt Pauline and Uncle Mark, I remember how warmly welcome Aunt Pauline made us feel. She was truly hospitable and gracious. I never felt in her home that I might do something to upset her. She was down to earth and kind. The Bible speaks highly of hospitality as it does of those who gave to others. Abraham is highlighted as one who entertained angels and even God himself when they came to visit. Aunt Pauline also reminds me of Dorcas, who in the New Testament made clothes for others. She was always busy making the world around her a better place, just like Dorcas. She worked hard to make her family around her and others around her happy. She liked to have wholesome fun so that no one around her could have ever said she was a Sadventist. Aunt Pauline was wise in the way that the Hebrew Bible speaks of wisdom, not as intellectualism, but as hands-on wisdom in the daily things that matter how to keep house, how to garden, how to preserve food, how to prepare food, how to treat family members, how to care for children, how to make others happy. And so it will be said of her when we see her again, that she will be among those who are wise, who will shine like the brightness of the sky, and among those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. May her life and the God who loves her be our comfort.
This song is called Moon River, and it was chosen with both Pauline and Mark in mind. Moon River, wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Two drifters off to see the world. There's such a lot of world to see. We're after the same rainbows and waiting round the bend. My huckleberry friend, Moon River and me.
One of my first memories of my mom was in Feather Falls, when we lived close to the sawmill. The sweet smell of pine smoke bit my nose in the chilly evening air. I was bundled up so well that I was sweating. Mom held me up to the window of our cabin. Looking in, I could see the familiar faces of my dad and some friends playing cards around the table, and Danny. That little flash of a memory said a lot about my mom. I was to learn that she thrived living the rustic life and making friends. She cherished her childhood years that she lived in the mountains around Oakhurst, California. We didn't have a lot of money growing up. One of the things Mom did for us kids is to take us to Bidwell Park to swim and play. We would usually have cousins, friends, or neighbors' kids with us. Mom would help us pack lunch. I remember making a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, wham and cheese sandwiches. They were always a favorite, on soy sunflower bread. Mom would bring fruit from the garden and a jug of water. We would spend all morning playing in the creek, moving rocks to make a dam, or trying to catch fish with our hands. At lunchtime, Mom would set the table, and we would devour the food. Wham sandwiches never tasted so good. Mom would take us a lot during the summers. My classmates would have stories about their trips to Disneyland and the Caribbean. Years later, I realized the value of being able to entertain oneself and the value of the gifts my mother gave us of enjoying nature and friendship. For all our school-age years, Mom took us kids with our friends on hikes every Sabbath, weather permitting. We explored Richardson Springs, Paradise area, Feather River Canyon, Table Mountain, Bidwell Park, the lava bluffs between Chico and Paradise, all kinds of areas around here. We especially liked finding hidden caves. It was exciting when Mom would show us evidence that the cave had been lived in. Mom also could name almost every plant and wildflower that we came across. She would stop to have us sample pine nuts from pine cones, gooseberries, and other berries. Sometimes she would pick plants and take home for our cooked dinner greens. These were good, and I was impressed that my mom knew about them. More than that, she was keeping our bodies strong and helping us build fun experiences with our friends. My parents planned vacations for 2 weeks every summer to remote locations in California. Our annual camping trips were always a learning adventure. Mom taught us how to find water, make shelter, and what to do if we got lost. I always thought I could do well if I was on Survivor because of all the things she taught us kids about surviving in nature. Well, we did have a tarp for shelter for the first few years. Later, we graduated to using a tent and then a little travel trailer. We did get to pack some food, but not nearly enough to last the 2 weeks of camping. Luckily, we always camped where we could catch lots of fish. Mom was so patient in teaching us how to bait a hook, how and where to cast, and how to land a fish. Thing is, she would get so excited landing a fish that would get flung up in the tree overhanging the water, or thrown way up the bank, off the hook, and flip-flop back towards the water. Both would get her excited, shrieking reactions that would send us kids scrambling after the fish. All the excitement made it even more fun for us. We always had a story to tell, and it was especially fun to mimic Mom's excited reactions when she was trying not to lose the fish. We would finish our day camping with worship from the Bible. If we were at an actual campground, we usually made friends with our neighbors. We would invite them to our campfire and play card games, sing, or tell stories. On one of our camping trips by Humbug Summit, we decided to explore a pile of large boulders on top of a long, steep hill. There was a thick overgrowth of manzanita bushes, about 8 feet tall, all the way up the hillside. We couldn't even find a deer trail going up the hill. We couldn't squeeze through the bushes. We couldn't get on top of them, so climbed by stepping on bent-over branches, halfway up the bush in the air. The last branch would hit us when it popped up as we stepped to the next branch. It was like walking on small trampolines. At times, I had to have help when the bushes were too far apart and the ground was too far down. It was slow going, but it added to the suspense about what we were going to see once we got on top. The whole way up, we talked about how nice the view was going to be when we got there. We wondered if we would find grinding holes in the rocks up there. We wondered if it had been a sacred place for the Native Americans that had lived in the area. We wondered if we were going to be the first white people to explore this unusual rock formation. At last, we made it to the top. There were a couple of shallow grinding holes. The sky was deep blue and with a few fluffy white clouds. The view was spectacular. We could see all the way down to a canyon. We were feeling a little like Eric the Red, Daniel Boone, and Meriwether Clark all in one. We turned around to look at the view in all directions, and there, behind us, was a newly graded fire trail leading down the backside of the hill to an unknown road. Our vision of being great explorers was over. We still had a sense of accomplishment, making it to the top when the bushes appeared to be impassable. It was about trusting the hand of your parent reaching for you. It took family teamwork, working together, and depending on each other to get to the top. We had been so proud of the whole family making this trek. It was about the journey. My mom, being the optimist, remarked that it had taken us 2 hours to climb up. But now we could just take the fire trail back and make it in time to make dinner. Mom loved the snow. When it snowed, she transformed like a child with enjoying the excitement. This made us kids happy because whenever it would snow, she would beg to go on a trip to the snow, and we would grab our saucer and inner tube and be ready. We were happy because she knew how to have fun. Something that impressed me about my mom was her dedication and service to others. When I was a child, she would go every week to set my grandmother's hair in curlers because Grandma no longer could do it. It didn't matter how many errands or how much house cleaning she needed to do. She kept the appointment every week. My mom delighted in celebrating the special moments in our lives and made each of us feel special. There were always family gatherings for every occasion, usually at our house, with lots of homemade traditional food. This brought fun times with grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. My mom was a master planner, and she started months in advance and planned out every detail. Mom was famous for her applesauce spice cake and my favorite, the pineapple upside-down cake at birthdays. She would send cards out not only for birthdays, but Valentine's Day, Easter, graduations, weddings, anniversaries, and of course, Christmas. She made us feel special in remembering even the small details of our lives and celebrating them with us. I will miss her phone calls to say, "I love you," and "Happy Sabbath." I will miss her repeatedly asking me if I'm hungry, if she can make me something to eat, if I want to take some veggies from the garden, or some food that she has made. No matter how I reassured her that I was well fed, her hospitality persisted. She was warm and generous from the heart through and through. Mom and Dad made it a point to take each of the grandchildren on an adventure when they were about 10 years old. This could be a week-long trip to Lake Odell, Crater Lake, or just a couple hours of fishing in their favorite fishing hole. My boys remember the special time getting to know their grandparents. When asked, one of my sons says the best part was getting a hug from Grandma, that she gives the best hugs ever. I enjoy poems my mom wrote at the birth of each of her grandchildren. I didn't know just how wonderful she was at poetry. Dan shared some of her poems with me. She has written quite a few poems about the Bible, about family and friends. This one she wrote for us kids and our families. When I read the poem, it takes me back to my childhood and camping along L&T Creek so many years ago. If I'm not getting too windy here, I'd like to go ahead and read the poem. It says, "Dear Dan and Laura Lee and families, I just want to write you about this weekend, where we went. It was a camping trip, a weekend well spent. We went to our old familiar campground, you know, the one you both used to play around. When we first got there, Dad said he had one wish, that I go down to the meadow and catch some fish. Well, as usual, I caught some trout small in size. I can reassure you, not one would win a prize. While walking on the meadow and looking down, I saw shooting stars, yellow and white, and lavender all around. On the way back, I heard a doe calling her fawn. I thought of the caring she'd give from dusk to dawn. When I got to camp, Dad had for me a big surprise, a new picnic table, handmade, set before my eyes. Why, it was just the week before, Dad had made a toilet with a handle on the door. We thanked God for our blessings and sat down to eat. That fresh-caught trout, and oh, what a treat. At 3 a.m., Mother Nature called us in the night, but oh, the beauty of the stars shining so bright. We woke this morning feeling rested and refreshed, awakened by a robin's song. We knew we'd been blessed. Dad, with Bible in hand, chose to sit at the campfire, while with words of the good book he would conspire. With Bible in hand, I chose the upper meadow to roam, and there I saw dandelions, buttercups, and meadow foam. A woodpecker pecking on the tree, a rat-a-tat-tat. He sure let me know exactly where he was at. A chipmunk scampering here and there and everywhere, hoping, I guess, that I'd leave some food somewhere. The meadow seems to be the prettiest I've seen. For some reason, it looks the greenest green. I'm glad God brought me out here to talk to me. Through his creations, the bird, the flower, and the tree, I went back to camp and talked to Dad all about the super pastimes we've had. We thought about how you two were such good sports. Though not much toys you would build these unique forts. You made them of wood and bark and were so proud. After all was in order, you called Mom and Dad real loud. We could see your happy faces as we grew near, and for your accomplishment, we'd give a note of cheer. We reminisced and were sort of sad, wishing back some of the good old days we once had. We then talked about the fun grandchildren can give. We could bring them up here and some experience relive. Oh, I forgot to tell you, there's enough snow here to hold cans of soda pop and keep them nice and cold. To leave the cool and the weekend makes us a little sad, but we're grateful to God for the good times we've had. Our love goes out to you and to your family so dear. In our hearts and our prayers, you're held ever near. Lots of love, Mom. So my mom had a strong belief in God, and as you know, she lived her life striving to follow his law, believing in the forgiveness of sin through Jesus Christ, her Savior, and with the promise of heaven as a reward. I look forward to the day when I may be reunited with my mother in heaven, God willing. Until then, she'll be dearly missed. I would like to read one more poem written by my mom called When I Get to Heaven. The last one, okay, I promise. When I get to heaven. When I get to heaven, Jesus I'll meet and throw my crown at his feet. I'll thank him for all he's done and that we can be together as one. I'll want to thank the Father too for all he's done for me and you. If he had not given his Son, we would all be undone. When I get to heaven, I'll greet my friends and rejoice they were faithful to the end. Oh, happy I'll be when family I'll see, and together we'll spend eternity. I'll look forward to meeting unseen hands who saved me many times on this land. I'll thank my guardian angel with a thankful heart who has been with me from the very start. Now, I'll want to meet Peter, I suspect, and give him a hug on the neck, for his witness was, you see, such an encouragement to me. I look forward to meeting John, for when the going got rough, he kept on. A son of thunder was he, but the beloved disciple he was to be. I could go on, but time would fail me to tell of each Bible personality. I'll look with eagerness to meet, and each one with a hug I'll greet. There will be time to see the universe and the angels to keep us on course. To see unfallen planets and all their beauty will be a sight, a real ecstasy. We'll have time to talk to the Father and Son and learn what it was like before earth had begun. The mysteries of their love will begin to understand, and we'll talk to them of their love firsthand. So many plans for heaven I'll make. Hopefully this is the road you'll take. For it's you Jesus wants to greet. Oh, the happiness when you two meet. Pauline Roberts.
I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks, and the sound of his voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me within my heart is ringing. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. Memories. Memories are a very special thing, especially at a time like this. So we're going to give you folks an opportunity to stand up where you are. We have a roaming mic, and we're going to invite you to share a few precious memories that you have of Pauline. But just before we do that, I'd like to share a couple precious memories. I'd say the first time that I met Pauline was when Dan and I were going to college at PUC. And I would, on occasions, on weekends, go home with Dan. And that was the first time I met Pauline. And right away, she made sure to make me feel loved and welcomed. I'd say a little bit of time after that was when I got a phone call from Pauline and Mark telling me that Dan had been in a terrible accident. And they said he was down at UC Davis, and that they'd like me to meet them there so that I could see Dan. Well, Dan was in such bad shape, and they were only allowing Pauline and Mark and Candy in to see him. Well, they knew how much that I wanted to see him too, and how much it would mean to Dan for me to be there. So they told, Pauline and Mark told the hospital that, well, we have another son. And so when I got there, they said, now remember, you're our son. And through the years, I have been their son. And I always felt that she was a second mom. And there were other good times too. I remember I'd be up at Alturas. Dan has a home up there in Alturas, and it was a nice place where the family and I myself, we would sometimes go up and stay in the home there. And it was nice because it was a good weekend getaway place and a place to go fishing and hiking up in the country. And of course, Pauline loved that. But I remember Pauline and Mark being up there and us having good times together. They'd come up sometimes the same time I was there, and we'd sit and play cribbage on Saturday nights. And I remember one time when Dan had taken Pauline and I out on a boat in Lake Orville and go fishing. And I'll tell you, I remember watching Pauline and seeing her with that fishing pole in her hand. That's when she was in her glory. She really loved to fish. And then I remember one time when Mark was in the hospital, and I had gone to visit him, and she was there, and apparently the hospital was going to release him that day, so I stuck around. I helped and followed and helped Mark home when we got back to the house. And just seeing when Dan was in the hospital and when Mark was in the hospital, just seeing how loving and compassionate of a lady Pauline was. She'll be missed. Please, someone share some other memories.
Mark and Pauline met us over there, and my husband had his pole and he was fishing away, and Mark and Pauline were fishing, and I was bored. So I had my husband tie a lure on a piece of string, and I didn't have a pole, but I threw it in the water, and right away something happened, and I pulled it out and there was nothing, so I threw it back in, and I caught my very first fish with Mark and Pauline at Black Butte Lake, and that was really fun.
Kevin Stiles, I'm Dan's business partner. We've been business partners for 34 years. Our first manager of our office was Pauline, shortly after we started our business, and she worked with us for 17 years in either the office manager or bookkeeper and various roles. There has never been a more loyal person than Pauline. So what she didn't have in business savvy, she more than made up for in loyalty. She was a huge part of our family for a very long time and watched all of our kids be born, and we will miss her greatly.
Thank you, Chris. Before I'm unable to speak and my eyes begin to water, I want to thank each one of you for being here. It means a lot to celebrate my mom's life and the love that she showed each one of us. There's many things that I could talk about, many things that I could tell you that she taught me. But three things rise to the top. The first one is something that she repeated often to my sister and I when we were very young. She told us, "You can do anything you set your mind to." And this doesn't come natural to a child, but if you hear it often enough, you begin to believe it. Well, I was about 9 or 10 years old, and And of course, that was when the Apollo program was in its height. It ran from 1968 to 1972. And every once in a while, my dad would turn on the television and we'd watch Walter Cronkite describe what was happening in the Apollo program. So I had an idea. I wanted to test my mom. So I waited for that unique time when we were all alone. And I said, Mom, I want to be an astronaut. And she looked at me. She looked me square in the eyes and said, Dan, if that's really what you want to do, you can do it. And I was quite surprised. I began to believe her. I began to believe that if I set my will to something, I could do anything that, with God's help, I could accomplish. The second thing she taught me was the love of learning. I was inquisitive and curious, and she fed that. She encouraged me from a very young age to read and to ask questions. I'm sure Mr. Glinkman and Mr. Sather and Mr. Sutherland and Mrs. Watts, none of my teachers probably appreciated it. I remember the first book, or my favorite book, rather, that she would read to us, and that was Ribsy. It was about a stray dog that a family took in, and it was so skinny you could see its ribs. I kind of identified with that. Later on, she'd read to us Robinson Crusoe and Tom Sawyer and Arabian Nights and Black Beauty, and on and on. We'd keep asking her to read another chapter until her voice began to wane, and she'd just say, I just can't read another chapter. That'll be it for tonight. She would read after dinner. She would read worship and give us an understanding of Jesus and the sacrifice he made, and really led in that respect. One day, though, she brought home a couple of boxes of books. I think I was 11 or so, and these books were encyclopedias. And there was no really good place to put them in the house, so they went in my room on a bookcase. And I remember in the wintertime, I began to thumb through them and read the articles, and started with A and then B, and pretty soon I'd get up through the middle, and towards summertime, I finished that set of encyclopedias. I was real proud of myself, so I went to Mom and I'd announced, I read the encyclopedias. That must be it. It's all there is. She kind of smiled. She said, later on in the week, I think we'll get you a library card. I hadn't been to a big library before. She took us to the county library, and wow, there were rows and rows and rows and rows of books, 40 feet long and 6 feet high. I'd never seen anything like that. And she'd go over to this big drawer set, start pulling out the drawers, and showed me how to look up books, the Dewey Decimal System. One set of drawers was for authors, the other was for subjects. She showed me how that worked. She took me through the library. There was a whole row of magazines. And these weren't like 5 years old like the encyclopedia. They were like this week. It was amazing. Another shelf had yellow page books from all over. She showed me how the different boroughs of New York had separate phone books. And you could look up any business in New York and see their telephone number. And there was another section that had to do with companies, manufacturers. You had to get the permission of a librarian to look at these, but you could pull them out and open them up, and you could look up a company, and you could see who was head of that company, and what their phone number was, and where their headquarters was. I was astounded. I was amazed. The third thing that she taught me was how to love. There's a special bond between moms and their children. And yes, you probably heard this story many times about UC Davis and my accident. And what I take from that, what I want to illustrate from that, was the fact that my mom and my dad would come almost every night to see me, to drive down to Sacramento. She would put her hand in mine, and the fear and the depression and the anxiety would begin to melt away. And when it was time for her to leave, she would give me a big hug, and she would say, "Dan, I love you." And I would say, "I love you too." Oftentimes, she would ask me what I wanted to be read, and at first, I was on the ventilator, I couldn't speak, so we had a little sign. It was the 2-3, and that meant Psalms 23. She would read that to me. Well, time went on. Lots of good times. Lots of times that showed me the meaning of love. My mom got, I won't say sick, but she had a disease, dementia, that robbed her of the ability to have rational thought, to take care of herself. And as the time went on and my dad passed away, she lost the ability even to speak. She could say yes and no, and on rare occasion, she would say, "I love you too." I remember the last time that I saw my mom and she was cognizant. And at the end of our visit, I reached down, I gave her a big hug, and I whispered in her ear, "I love you, Mom." And she said, "I love you too." "I love you too, Mom. I love you too."
Let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we want to thank you for giving us your daughter Pauline to brighten and improve our lives. May you, the God of all comfort, comfort us as we miss this glowing example of your love for us. Thank you for what you gave us through her and the life that she lived among us. May you enable us to stand the distance between earth and heaven until you unite us with her. In Jesus' name, amen.
This concludes the services, and on behalf of the family, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here today and sharing your love and support. There will be a private service on Monday at the Glen Oak Cemetery here in Chico. At this time, I'd like to ask you to remain seated while we're going to first have the family make their way out to the vestibule. And then we'll be ushering the rest of you folks out there so that you can greet the family and fellowship. And there's been some light refreshments made available too. May you go in peace. God bless.